pending items, Board of Selectmen annual calendar. And I guess, Mike, you put a version in the package here tonight. Or somebody did.
Chris, I think, actually.
I think that's from the last meeting, I had handed out at either the last meeting or a prior meeting. I don't believe we've actually gone through it.
Is this an update on the one that was handed out before or not?
I did not update it, no.
Okay. Gus had made some suggestions about some of the
Okay.
municipal update by the town administrator, where the wrong months and those sorts of things. We should just kind of capture those and put them in the right
Sure.
dates.
You want to give me a copy of that? I can take that.
I can do better than that. I have more.
Okay.
Can you please?
I'll leave this with you. I actually have this on a schedule. I took your entire sheet, plus the earlier list that you had, and put it on a schedule.
Excellent.
So you can look at this if you want, or I'll leave this with you. But what I did was figured out that I think the quarterly financial updates or budget updates that Mike was going to provide, those were off. I pushed those out an extra month past the end of the quarter based on our earlier discussion. That's one of the points. As I look through the logic on some of this, I still have a few questions. For instance, in September, we're establishing the capital and operating budget guidelines for next fiscal year, but I'm curious how we do that before we've reviewed the estimated town revenues and debt that we don't look at until October. So there's a couple places where, as I was looking at it, just the logic and sequencing of topics, it seemed like we maybe want to make a few adjustments, unless I just don't understand what we use to do that.
Yeah, one of the problems with getting the financials quickly is that the accounting department gets tied up working on the school reports, which have to be submitted to the Department of Education by October 1st.
Yep.
And so they spend quite a bit of the summer trying to prepare those and time on the school department. That's why it's tough to get financials in early.
But yeah, I wasn't necessarily pushing back on when the financials, I'm saying that it seems to me that before you can establish guidance for the coming year, you kind of need to know where you stand. So right now, the way it's set, we're providing guidelines in September, but we're not seeing the actual information that might inform those guidelines until October.
Actually, I prepared my first fiscal 19 budget estimate last week, so I'll get that to you next week. It's very rough, and it's not as complicated as you would think.
Yep.
Basically, we get 3% increase in our revenues, 2.5% from proposition 2.5, plus new growth adds about another half to 1%.
So I think what I hear you telling me, that's fine. I think what I hear you telling me is, so it therefore is reasonable to have the guidelines issued in September, because whatever we might do in October is going to be by way of refining our understanding, not establishing our understanding.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, all right with that.
We still get 2/3 of our money from the property tax in spite of Proposition 2.5. And that is set by, is a very formulaic method. You take 2.5% of your prior year's levy, and then you add new growth to it. So, and then you figure out your debt exclusions.
Yep.
And that's, I can figure that out. I just talked to the assessor today and added 25,000 as a result of the override.
So my sensitivity around this, and Mike probably shares it, or maybe not, but from having been on the warrant committee, where every year at the beginning of the budget cycle, the warrant committee issues guidance,
Yes.
Which is fundamentally of no apparent impact on how the schools develop their budgets. And because of that, translates into guidance for everybody else's, like zero growth. And then it's like a bluff game. We lay out some guidelines that we don't really mean, because maybe they're impossible. And then what happens is we dare, those people who are sufficiently pressured to feel like they have to come in and ignore us, and then we have a discussion. So it would be nice if we had guidelines that really
We have
represented
no
them.
jurisdiction over the school committee.
Well, I understand that. Yeah, I understand that. But what I'm getting at is that I've looked at it the time I was on the warrant committee, and guidance that goes up front is a fairly hollow thing. And I'm looking for a way to have it be a more meaningful, if, maybe it's not possible.
Well,
But
we
I'd
did,
like it to be more meaningful.
I mean, last year, you people wanted the information early, so we had a budget meeting, I think in September, and we gave them 3% guidelines.
Mhm.
And, with the schools come in at 3.6%, 3.7% or something like that.
Well, it started much higher than that.
That's what it
It started at
started.
6.8.
Yeah.
We started thinking there
They
was gonna be an
started,
override.
they started over 6, yeah,
Yeah.
they came down quite, maybe it was 4.6. But we did manage to, you know, at the beginning of the year, the budget season, we talked about need an operating override. And probably because we gave that guidance out, the warrant committee really went to town and they ended up without, we didn't need an override, operating override.
Yeah.
So it does have some effect, not as much as we'd like, but
So 2 points. One, I take away that fine, it's okay in September, that's a good time because it's doable given your early projections.
Yeah.
And my other was a sentiment to try to put as much validity into those guidelines to where they actually mean something and affect behavior to the extent that they're legitimate guidelines. I'm not just arbitrarily suggesting that.
Well, I mean, I think, Gus, to your point, and I didn't mean to be flippant before.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the ways to do that was say, we should invite the school committee and the superintendent to this meeting
Mhm.
and set the guidelines with them,
Mhm.
or at least have a discussion with them about what they're thinking about. And the reality is, I mean, the only leverage we would have would be if we would decline to put an override on the ballot.
Mhm.
which is one of the ways we would do it.
The critical time period that you have with the schools is at whatever time they're negotiating new contracts, because that's where you have some leverage. Hypothetically, a town meeting, the first year that goes before the budget that includes contracts, could actually say no. The legislative body has that authority.
Right.
So,
And
at
then
that
it just,
time,
then it just comes down to the willingness of the warrant committee to go to town meeting with a recommendation that the school committee doesn't support, and have a disagreement about what it's going to be, which hasn't happened.
Yeah, I prefer to minimize the number of let's go to town meeting and have everybody disagreeing with the taxpayers, although that could happen. I'm really looking for a way to, and I don't know the answer to this, but if we're providing guidelines in September, and if there's discussions around overrides are or aren't needed as part of that guideline setting process, there ought to be some thought process that we collectively use to decide when it's appropriate to say, you know, town, there are probably gonna be operating overrides coming in here, and when it's appropriate to say, no, I know you have lots of good ideas about things you wanna do, but we don't see the fundamental justification to it. So these guidelines have been made fully aware that you would like, you would like an operating override, but we're not gonna go into this budget cycle with that kind of a predisposition. So,
the difficult part is not fine tuning. I mean, the general guidelines, I can give you an estimate 5 years out right now at 3% a year.
yeah.
The difficulty is, for example, right now, the state budget. They seem to be having some difficulty meeting their targets for this year, and yet they're projecting an increase of 3.5% for next year in their revenue stream. Who knows? And we won't know that until,
Mhm.
you know, way, way past the budget season. We don't even know what we're getting for this year we're concluding, you know, we're starting next year that we've already voted on. The other thing is, you know, there's some, how can you predict interest rates? You know, we have a lot of investable cash that we earn interest on. How can you predict, you know, I read articles that says the car purchase is slowing down. Well, excise tax revenue can drop pretty quickly if people are not buying new cars. So those variables, water and sewer, you know, I think water and sewer is gonna be interesting this year because we've had so much water rain during the normally season when people are high consumers for water. That's a good thing in a way, and it drops our water consumption. On the other hand, it drops our revenues for the Water Enterprise Fund when they've got some big projects coming down the road. So, I can give you the stuff now, but it's gonna be fine-tuned all the way through. The other thing is I believe under it's either the charter or the bylaw, the school committee is required to give you their budget by the end of January. So that's pretty far into the budget season, so you don't really know, and even after that, they're still changing it, so it's that timing phase that, you get a lot of the information that you need to judge whether you need an override isn't available when you need it to make those judgments.
My only point, if we're issuing guidelines in September, we're basing it on the best we can. And if there's stuff that's so slippery that there's nothing good to base it on, I'd say then let's not waste people's time giving them a superficial guideline that doesn't mean anything.
But I think, certainly, we could take this sort of baby steps, right? I mean, the departments that are under our jurisdiction have more reason to follow our guidelines than not. And I think, ultimately, the budgets that get submitted to the warrant committee are our budgets. And so, if the budgets come in from the departments that don't follow our guidelines, we just change them, right?
Yes, yeah. One of the other problems too is the budgets that are most unpredictable are health insurance and pensions. I mean, if you can tell me what health insurance rate's gonna go up next year, I'll get you a job in Washington. Or the same thing with pensions. Now, we have a rough guideline from Norfolk County that you expect a 10% increase each year in your assessment. So if you take a $2.3 million budget, 10% is $230,000. We only get about $1.4 million in new revenues. So if you take $230 just for pensions, add in health insurance, a good chunk of what you need is already gone. So we've been lucky that we haven't had to have an override. And it's a combination of things that we've been lucky on our free cash. We estimate conservatively on revenues, but
The school side sped budget.
I wasn't intending to drag that one particular point out as long as it's gone. I just looked at the logic of the items and it seemed wrong. You have two more things, so.
I do think, but just to tie up that, I think that Mike's idea is good one to have a meeting early on with the schools and the school committee to just talk about the issue and the budgeting and try to come to some consensus, maybe in September.
Yeah, I agree with that. The next one has to do with Mike, and again, this is the timing, but there were certain items in here that were your annual performance, which I think you had May was the month that your performance evaluation process would be figured out. And then June was the month of the review, and I'm the new guy here, so I don't know what you've done over the past year in the way that probably anybody should evaluate your performance would. But my question is, I wasn't sure what the logic of that was versus evaluating performance after the end of fiscal year, which would have kind of pushed the evaluation out into July. I just didn't understand the logic.
I know that when I was putting those things into the schedule, I did it on the basis that after the town meeting, that there's a lull in the selectmen's workload. And so that there's available time through the summer to do things like that.
And I think part of it, though, some of the, I know we waited almost a year to do your evaluation last year, right? We did his, I guess it must have been before you were elected, guys, but just barely before. So it was a long time, and part of it is connected also with the merit increase in the merit pool as well, or the timing of that.
Well, they're available, like the merit pool is available July 1st of 2017. We usually review for the prior year. We just had some scheduling difficulties in that review, and Mike kept getting pushed out and pushed out and pushed out.
So that would be consistent, Gus, with the review that we do in July.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually looking at May as being what would not be a quiet month if the goal setting that was in here was real.
Well, the goals then should happen at some
Yeah,
point, and it hasn't been happening.
right. So actually, I was seeing May as actually being a potentially busy month, if that's what we're going to do in May, to get our act together before the start of the new fiscal year, so.
Yeah,
So
that's why I kind of threw this together this afternoon, taking all these things into account.
Yep.
And And actually, it all leads up to setting the annual calendar, because you're looking at all these things that are necessary precursors to really having an effective annual calendar. Starting with the goal setting, and then the master plan, the capital plan, the charter and bylaw updates, the strategic plans that several departments are doing. And they all sort of are starting long-term, coming in on the short-term, getting to the actual, well, what are we gonna do this year? So it's trying to look at it from
Okay.
where do you begin? Do you start at the top or the bottom?
I'm gonna pass this to you, because I think you can unfold it if you wanna look at it, but I don't.
Was
I-
this one of your famous
I
charts?
put the whole thing on a schedule, but I also reorganized things from by major task areas. So when I look at what you've done here, I did it there, but I tried to use what Pete had to put it actually on a timeline. You and I maybe should talk directly on that once you've had a chance to look at it. But I was just I wasn't trying to drive a change for the sake of changing anything. I was trying to kind of lay out the logic and the connections, what had to go before something else, just to see what it showed up as. You'll see the very bottom section, which was all the meetings with committees and departments. I didn't schedule those. I made a few specific comments on some things, Pete, from 3 weeks ago or something. I didn't try to schedule those at all. There's a lot of them. And so either we have visits from multiple committees, if we're gonna hit everybody
Well,
in the
that's how Mike
year.
has done it in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
So you can see what I did, and then maybe we can just,
Is that something,
Yeah.
Gus, that you could circulate to us in a digital format? Do you have a?
if you get Microsoft Project, I can, otherwise I have to sit there and do the cutting and pasting that I did on that one, so I'd be more than happy to. I'll make more copies if you want them, but usually my large sheets are things that I only impose on myself, but I'd be more than happy to provide
Yeah,
them. more.
maybe as the thing's still working down at the garage, we could make copies of this.
Oh, maybe, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought Pete was right, Pete said, don't try to schedule on your calendar the meetings with department heads, because invariably, somebody can't make it.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to, where Ellen knows the horrors of this, trying to get meetings to get people together at the same time.
Well, I wasn't even sure, like with fire chiefs and police chiefs, they come in here when there's certain people that are gonna be in here when we need to talk to them. So the idea that we need to schedule a separate meeting other than budget reviews, didn't make a lot of sense to me. in some
Just,
cases.
FYI, you probably may be aware of this, haven't been on the warrant committee, but the annual town meeting is not etched in stone either. That, by the Board of Selectmen has the authority to push that back, and there have been occasions when that's been done because of not enough information from the state, so.
That's fairly recent, though, within the past 10 years, it never was.
No,
It was
they just
shorter.
expanded the period into June. You could always have it by up to, the statute gave you the authority, it had to be basically May, they now give you a broader range of when you can have a town meeting. But the bottom line is that by statute, the selectmen with justification can push back an annual town meeting date.
Right, yeah. It was interesting, I was talking to Mark today, and he pointed out that the legislature is going into a joint session to see if they can get agreement between the House and the Senate on their budget behind closed doors.
First meeting.
The rules are made by them, but they don't apply to them. Okay, well, this is just a preliminary that I threw together, just trying to, in my own head, get together a sense of how because there's so many of these things that have come about in the last couple of years. The master plan, the capital plan, the codification, and all that stuff is, the strategic plans are relatively new, although the school's been doing it for a while, but I think it sort of starts at the broad scale and narrows down, which is probably the way we want to be going.
So Chris, you'll see you can make copies of that. And Pete and Mike, I wasn't trying to re-engineer anything there, I was just trying to accurately take what was on this list and map it, and then do
I'd
some
be happy to
modeling.
have you re-engineer it.
Well, my point is, I wasn't trying to drive any issues with it, I was just trying to capture it in a way that showed the flow, that's all.
That's the West Point in you.
That's the project management consultant.
I've missed your big charts and spreadsheets.
I know.
I'm glad to have you back in my life.
That's what I said when he had.
The warrant committee, they were
small.
I really went wild when I learned how to do the conditional formatting on cells, to make them go red, green, or yellow. That was the year they upgraded that. I was in the hot heavens on that one.
So anything more on the annual calendar?
No, I mean, I think both of them are, I mean, I think we're heading in the right direction. And I think the only thing I would note is, for some of the committees, I think we ought to go through and figure out, you know, which ones do we need to see every year, which ones should be on more of a 2 or 3 year cycle, because one of the things that we tried to do with the warrant committee too was, we don't need to have a meeting just to have a meeting. And so I think it is good to have regular check-ins with different committees, but it may be that for, you know, Gus, to your point, the fire chief, police chief, they're almost certainly gonna be in here anyway, probably don't need to schedule them in for an annual review. Same thing true with DPW. Some of the other ones, we might wanna put them on, okay, every 2 years at least, we're gonna see this committee, every 2 years we'll see this, if we haven't had occasion otherwise for some reason. I wouldn't want people coming in just to give an update, give a report without, you know, a huge need for it.
What I've tried to do in the past is set it up, so for example, there's a lot of boards, it's helpful for one board to know what a similar board is doing. So if you have the historical commission, the Dwight Derby House, the Historical Society, the Historic District Commission, if you could put together a group of people like that, even the downtown study committee, so that they can have a sense.
I mean, the one that I do think is critical, I mean, that you know, the other boards in the town, it seems to be the ones that are most important for us to have regular discussions with, are the school committee, the warrant committee, which we do anyway, and the planning board. Those are the ones that have the biggest impact on the budgeting issues, that, and that where there can be some improved coordination with those elected boards or appointed boards. And warrant committee, we have built in some meetings with them, but I think it would be, if we decide to have the school committee come in September, it would be useful to have a warrant committee at least there to hear the discussion, you know, because the budgets are gonna be driven by the selectmen and driven by the school committee. At least they can hear what that discussion is and kick it off before. Then at least when the warrant committee comes back in November, they have a chance to digest that discussion. They know where the selectmen and the school committee are coming from. And I think that the idea is the warrant committee is then supposed to provide sort of an independent check on its own recommendation. Here's what we think you ought to be doing in this season, with the two groups kind of coming to ask for money.
And I think the way they've set it up the last couple of years, where they take the big budgets and assign more than one person to the big budgets, is very helpful, because, you know, if you spend 90% of your money on 5 departmental budgets, then those are the ones you ought to take a look at. So,
And I think formalizing, we discussed it, but I think formalizing the cutoff for the submission of articles. You know, we have the deadline for town meeting articles by citizen petition, I think we should move that from January to December. And I think December 1st ought to be our cutoff for.
that's gonna be a culture shock.
Well, but I just
I
think it's,
agree with
you know,
that,
You're
yeah.
gonna have you're gonna have to go through a year where it's, no, we're not gonna
Yeah,
take it.
because I think
Get
it's-
the point across.
this year in particular, but, you know, so much gets pushed to the end, the warrant committee is overwhelmed at the end. And I think the idea would be, if you can set that cutoff for the articles, they can deal with the articles earlier in the process. And then particularly because the school committee budget, and the superintendent's proposed budget usually comes out beginning of January. You don't get the official school committee budget until several weeks after that. And that sets off a substantial amount of work. At the same time, at least under what's been happening, all the articles are finally getting in. Whereas if we at least move that article deadline up, it gives the warrant committee more time to use that January period effectively to evaluate those warrant articles before you get into kind of the nitty-gritty around the budgets, instead of doing it all at the same time.
So where would you move it up to?
December 1st.
December 1st.
First, yeah. I would say if you want to have an article at town meeting that goes in the warrant, You gotta have it, you gotta write it and have it in by December first.
I've tried to make it clear to the certain boards and commissions that after a reasonable rest following town meeting, that's the time to get working on the following year. Don't wait till November 1st all of a sudden and then start looking at what you need for changes. It's too late at that point.
So Mark, are there any limits legally on the ability to, is there any problem with setting December 1st as a deadline from a standpoint of citizens being able to submit petitions for articles?
No, because hypothetically, the statute's incredibly simple. We also have a bylaw that supplements it, but basically the statute, if voters feel that strongly, they can get the signatures for a special.
Okay.
So they've got that as an option. Whereas for an annual, they only need 10 signatures, so it's an easier process to do it from a citizen initiative standpoint.
I think the problem you have is you have to give enough time for them, when you open the warrant, to submit the articles. And the other problem is December 1st is right after Thanksgiving. It's a few weeks before Christmas, and it's when people tend to be incredibly busy, trying to, and with family commitments, and it's hard for them to get
Make
things
it,
in.
and what would you suggest then? Have it be a
January 1, still?
January 10th,
I think January 10th or January 15th would be
middle of January?
reasonable.
Yeah.
Because you're not
Yeah.
opening the warrant until mid-December. That gives people time to do it. And we'll have a form for any boards, committees, citizens. to
We have
submit that.
very, historically, we have a handful of citizen petitions over the years. I can count them on one hand, really. And we have a bylaw that gives all boards, all town elected and appointed boards the authority to submit articles. So that's where they're coming from.
I think the real difficulty is we've been kind of lenient. We've said, you know, the departments will say, would you put a placeholder in for me? I'd like to put an article. And then you don't see the article until, you know, mid-February or beginning of March. Or
So will
I'm
this solve
writing-
that problem?
I'm writing the articles.
You're right, so I think now in the research that we did when we ran into this problem a few months ago, is that we'll issue a new policy saying this is the form you're going to use to submit the article. We aren't going to save any spots on the warrant for you like we have in the past. You'll have to submit what your article is and then work with Mark on the wording. And we'd like to have that in by just, by January 15th.
Then do we need
This-
two, should there be two deadlines? One is the initial submission of the article for review, but another deadline for the finalization of the article.
Yeah, yeah.
This year was frankly a perfect storm. There were a variety of things going on. Obviously, the planning board had taken on a major project, which dragged out way longer than they thought it would. But then you also had Mo getting caught up and realizing that we needed to get a bunch of bylaws on the books to put us in conformity with our prior stormwater permit. And other things that came in like that, so it was like, they all came together, and they were complex, they were significant, and then you had the capital projects.
And then you had Dale Street.
Right.
On top of it all.
So if there were a deadline for a final wording of an article, what would it be?
I would say that probably the January 15th. Yeah.
That then puts pressure on the legal, if the deadline to have, the initial submission deadline would be what, December 1st?
But again, it depends what it is. The financial stuff is simple, it's straightforward, there's no, there's no magic to them. It's some kind of a bylaw scheme or some complex project
Right.
that you really have to customize the article, that's the problem.
Right,
Well, I think we gotta just have one deadline.
right.
I think
Right.
January.
We can't say one deadline, no, well, one deadline, regardless of how complicated your article is, even if it's simple.
January 15th.
January 15th.
For fire.
For what, the initial or the final?
For both.
For the final is January 15th, so recognizing that some of those articles are going to require legal review, what is the deadline for the initial submission of the article?
I would say for the final wording from the department, January 15th, then you give it to town council and he puts it in front.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, okay.
You know, they don't have to
got,
Okay,
at that
perfect.
point, once it's in, and you've got weeks
Okay.
to get it in
Okay,
final
all right.
form.
So a single deadline, basically people will understand the thing you actually want to have go in, pending legal review is January 15th.
I mean, ideally, it won't come out of the blue, I would have been apprised that they were working on something leading up to that.
Yeah.
Or it might have even been initiated with me in the first place.
And we should probably memorialize here somewhere when we open and close the warrant for the town.
It's, it's
I
on
think it's
the,
here, so it's in under December.
we open in December and then we close in.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, it's there. I may not have the exact dates right on that thing, like I was in the right month, but I was kind of, what you'll see is at the very top, I scheduled the default dates for Board of Selectmen meetings the first and third Tuesday, so I basically picked dates that mapped onto those dates, but that was default.
Yeah, everything's fluid at this point anyway.
Can I raise one more issue, not for, what will hopefully not be an annual item, which I think we ought to be planning for this summer's calendar. I know Steve Nolan is coming in on June 20th to give an update. And Bill, I'm interested in your view of this as well. It seemed to me if we're heading towards a November special town meeting in the hospital, that we ought to have a fairly significant meeting with the planning committee in August. August 1st or August 15th meeting, because I don't think Steve will have the final recommendation from the hospital committee on June 20th, but if we're really gonna have a special town meeting with a warrant and the rest of it in November, which is the last date that I've heard, then we ought to get that on the calendar to begin our process for deciding what we're gonna advance in the special town meeting, what that proposal will be, and all the rest of it. So I just don't wanna let that slip. September is too late. And so I think one of those two meetings in August, we ought to have the hospital committee in as we start to finalize what the warrant's gonna look like and finalize what the proposal's gonna be and a schedule for dealing with any zoning proposals and the rest of it that's gonna come. I think that's when we have to have that meeting.
There's a pretty detailed agenda for tomorrow night's meeting of the committee. One of the things that they're looking at is the November timeframe, what it's gonna take to get there. The consultant, Carrie, has laid out some steps that need to happen between now and then, so I don't know what the answer to your suggestion is. I don't know where they're going to be at the end of tomorrow night's meeting. And I would suggest that you probably won't know, and Steve probably won't know until he's in to see you guys on the 20th, you know, what's the good date for a review, you know, in advance of the November meeting.
Editorially, I will also say, having gone to the majority of the meetings for the last year and a half with the master planning committee, I think the selectmen need to be very clear for the benefit of the committee on what exactly it is the committee needs to deliver for that fall meeting. We know they're delivering zoning changes. We don't know what else. There's a concept, but in terms of how that concept gets packaged, I think the committee has struggled with it. And what I mean by that is how specific and buttoned down is this concept supposed to be? Because there's a lot of, trying to reconcile everything down to the last dotted I and crossed T, I think is what's made this kind of an arduous process for the committee.
And, you know, one of the things that when they talk about, you know, zoning and everything else, they're talking about overlay districts and everything else. So an overlay district can be pretty broad.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you don't necessarily have to get down to the fact, you know, we're gonna have a sandwich shop over here and something else over here. or
Well, you
whatever.
have a
So,
list of uses.
yeah, so they've got some flexibility.
Right. But I think they're driving for a lot more specificity.
I think they probably, well, but I also think one of the things that they should be looking at, and they probably, if I look at Carrie's schedule and everything else, is that a realization of what they've bitten off to get done before the November meeting and everything else. And I don't know that they've sat down and made a judgment that says, yes, this is overly ambitious, this is not, or whatever. I think that's part of the process that's gonna happen in the next couple of meetings.
I think it'd be good for us to have a real working meeting with them and
Yeah.
really hash through where they are and as you said, what we're looking for, expecting from them. So, and that might be good to do in August.
So I think you ought to lay that on
So we
Steve,
can probably
perhaps,
see
you know.
when it comes.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think we gotta have a pretty detailed discussion on the 20th, right?
Right.
We can't, by the time August comes around, we're really gonna be, if it's a November town meeting, the warrant's gotta go out 30 days in advance of that. So you've gotta be done with everything as what's being proposed, early October. The reality is, you'll wanna be having some public meetings in advance of the special town meeting to lay out what's going to be proposed and the rest of it. So I think August has to be more, we've got to be closer to finalizing what the proposal's going to be with some tweaks rather than.
Or not,
Right.
depending on what happens over the next meeting, the next meeting. I think, Gus, that at tomorrow night, I assume you're gonna go to tomorrow night's
Yeah.
meeting. I think you ought to lay out what you expect to hear on the 20th, as well as, an overall.
So I won't be here on the 20th, I'm in Texas, so I'll make sure that they tell me what they'd like to hear on their behalf for that. I think I actually think the idea of a working meeting is a good one. And I think August is the right time frame, and part of it is because if you go too far down the road, then it's whatever it is, and it's either thumbs up or thumbs down, even here at the Board of Selectmen, where August might provide some time for some give and take and some back and forth with a committee that has enough time to actually react to any of that. That I think would be beneficial all around.
But I think on the 20th, we can probably, hopefully provide some guidance about this level of detail question, and exactly what we
Yeah.
expect to see. I mean, just from conceptually, the way I've always thought of it is that you would have 3 articles, whether they're 3 articles or 12 articles. Legally, you'd have 1 article that would be potentially just the master plan, to endorse the master plan for the hospital. Which is sort of, you don't have to do it, right, legally you don't have to do it. The second would be the zoning changes. And then the third would be if the first 2 fail, the fallback article, pay for the cost of not doing anything there. So you kind of have that, the warrant would look something like that with however many subparts of it that you read. And then, if the first 2 were to pass, then the third article would be dismissed. If the first 2 were to fail, you would then vote on the third article, which essentially, in my mind, has always been a debt override article for the cost of the demolition of all the buildings.
See, I don't see that at all. I see the fact that the town does, if the town didn't like a concept or, a concept that drove a set of zoning changes, and we don't like that, that doesn't automatically default to mean we don't like anything. It could just mean we don't like your answer. So I wouldn't make it that binary. It's taken me a year to really appreciate the one thing that, the issue that I'm sensitive to, that you didn't show up in that first article you talked about, is this is not, in my opinion here, the master plan is not the detailed development plan for the state hospital. And that, in essence, is the point of confusion in what this committee is trying to do. This is not the thing that if the master plan is accepted, we issue the bid documents the next day. This is the thing that says we take a look at what the overall needs of the town are, we bring good real estate development expertise to bear, and we believe the best way for us to strategically approach the development of this property is through this master plan that requires these zoning changes. The place that starts to grind down, I think, even in the committee, is when they try to, this building will be used for that, and I think it would be a mistake to try to get them to do that. I don't think they'll get there for November if that's the kind of thing, and when they do get there.
I agree with that entirely. To me, the virtue of the master plan is to make concrete the zoning changes you propose, right?
Yeah.
Because the zoning changes are abstract, and my view of it is that if you were to go to town meeting, to special town meeting with the master plan would pass, the zoning would pass, then the disposition of the land and the detailed work that's done there is left to kind of the ordinary process of the town's disposition of land, right? There's no longer a special hospital process, right? There's
Well,
no-
you need a
whether
town
it's-
meeting authorization to dispose of the land.
Yeah, but that's an ordinary part of the disposition of land. What I'm saying is, we're not then going to have a hospital disposition planning committee, right? We have an existing economic development committee, the board of selectmen, the planning board, the zoning board of appeals. So that disposition part of it then just kind of becomes, just to your point, part of the overall planning of the town in the implementation of the master plan. But obviously, that's going to change as different opportunities come along within the confines of what's authorized by the zoning. I don't see it as the first step, and then now there's another version of the hospital committee that's doing the detailed work. It's part of, it's land the town owns, we have a plan for that land that's been zoned a certain way, that will be disposed of in the way we dispose of any other piece of land.
Except some of the, well, this is probably, we'll have to have a lot of conversation
Yeah,
about
this is
this,
just
because it's not just a matter of disposing of the land, it's like if there's projects that will have to be defined to actually do stuff.
Well, that's a
And
development
somebody's gonna do that.
But
Well,
part of
if
the
it's,
position
if,
is a development agreement,
right,
instead of just a clean, here it is, pay X number of dollars, it
Right.
shows
right,
block.
right.
It's, here it is, develop it along this,
Right.
as you responded to our RFP,
Right.
and whatever safeguards you need in place to ensure that that
That,
happens.
that's my point, because
And I
there is,
agree.
okay, there is, I don't know that it's the economic development committee that's developed.
There's some
for that
committee
property.
that needs to be involved, I
Right.
think, in this
That was-
But
process.
it shouldn't be a hospital-specific committee, is my point. Is that, and to your point, that Gus, that you persuaded me of this, of the need for all of this to be in the context of the overall town goals.
Mhm.
And that once the zoning changes have been done, and we have an overall set of guidance about what we're going to do,
Mhm.
to me, the planning part of it is over, right? And so the master plan may say, this is the piece of land that is, we think should go first.
Mhm.
This chunk of land in the master plan is first, it's zoned this way, and then it's left to, whether it's the economic development committee or just the board of selectmen with a consultant to design the RFP consistent with that zoning change and proposal, as opposed to, what I don't wanna have happen is, you know, if the master plan is too general, well, then we're gonna spend a year, you know, kind of going through the RFP process. And to me, if master plan is passed, if the zoning plan is passed, you know, we have not done a lot of it, but there is a process in place for the disposition of land. Ideally, if you approved it at the special town meeting, you'd be approving the disposition of land at the annual town meeting next spring for the first piece.
So I think it's gonna turn out to be more complicated
I
than
think
that.
so.
It may well be,
Okay.
but I don't know that, having a follow-on committee specifically focused on the hospital is necessarily the way to do it, beyond the far side.
No, but you can meld two committees. I mean, I think you need some of the thought processes that have gone into whatever the committee comes up with when they're done. I think there needs to be some continuity between the two committees. I don't know that it needs to be a separate committee, but I don't know that you have a committee that's formed now elsewhere in the town
Right.
that right now is up to that task.
I agree. I just want to make sure what I don't want to have is I don't want the committee that, this is just one-third of the view, you may disagree, and then my view is irrelevant. Thinking that they're going to be doing more planning after the town meeting, right? So in other words, to me, the charter of that committee is to deliver a master plan for the zoning changes. Once that's been done,
But their goal, your charter through them, as they saw it, and the way they subcontracted to their consultants and everything else in phases, was to take it right through the RFP process.
I know, and I think that part was a mistake.
Well, but that's for
I
you to
agree
say,
that.
that's
I
for you to
agree.
say, but I'm just saying right now, you know, what you're talking about now is not as how they receive their task now.
Right.
Believe me, I'm sure they would very much like to get it over with.
Right, right. Mike, I can't tell whether we're talking past each other and saying the same thing or not, but let me try to give one specific example to make it concrete. Let's say that the master planning committee comes in and part of the scheme that they come up with is some piece of property will have 42 units of affordable housing on it, which is not too far away from the possible because it's already there. We have 1 year of safe harbor on 40B right now. We figure out ways to get 1 more year of safe harbor on 40B to get a second year. And we would actually like to see 42 units of affordable housing get us a third and fourth year of safe harbor using the state hospital property or something up there. At the point that we get past next fall's town meeting, we say, that's what we want to do. Somebody has to start doing something that's competent to actually design a building and construct the contracting documents to get somebody working on it. That's, I'm not talking about planning and blow the smoke rings in the air planning. I'm talking about that detailed execution planning is going to be needed. That's the thing I'm talking about.
And we're on the same page. Because but that to me is, that doesn't really require a committee, that requires a consultant to design it, right? The committee's come up with a master plan, 42 units of affordable housing, they come back to the board of selectmen and say, okay, we're gonna do it. Our timing for this is because of the expansion of Tilden Village or because of something else, we're gonna have safe harbor through 2019. We really wanna design an RFP for this to come online in 2019 to give us the 2 years beyond that, right? And so that's sort of the mandate within the zoning that's already been done.
I'll make a comment here. You've seen my email on what happened at our first attempt at getting safe harbors through
Well, we have a year on that
the
though.
Concom.
We have a year on
No,
that.
we're not there yet, I think is what it was.
I'm not sure, I mean, and so you're not there, and I see, and I remarked it to this at the Concom, I see all of these committees and all of these boards and everything almost operating independently with no communications between them. And this, I can't tell you how many, I go to a lot of meetings, and I can't tell you how many meetings I've been at where I've had somebody say, well, what did this other board say, or what did this other board do? Did you get this other approval and everything else? And at that Concom meeting, I was somewhat frustrated because I wound up giving the background of why Larkin was there. For his original plan called for only like 2 patios or 3 patios that were going to be in the wetlands. And to meet our request, the town's request, that he up the number of affordables and everything else, he's now looking at something like, I want to say, off the top of my head, 6 buildings or whatever, or 7 buildings that are in some combination of either the 200 Riverfront or within the Board of Vegetative.
Well, we only asked him to add 1.
But he had to, again, he's got financial issues and everything else. I mean, I think we learned with the 440 units, you don't get affordables without some corresponding impact of market rate units. I'm sorry, they go together. I mean, you don't get,
Of course.
we got 20 affordables in the 440 units or whatever, and we got 100 market rate units to go with it. So these things are all tied together. And I did not go into Larkin's plans. I did not ask, how much and why and all the rest of that stuff. But the fact of the matter is that the Concom appeared not to know any of the background. Not that it necessarily influences the decisions that they make. Their job is to protect the wetlands. But I found myself giving the background as to why he was back now with an increased, a changed plan, and why he was utilizing more of the wetlands and everything else. I found that very frustrating, and it's not the first time that these kinds of things have happened in the meetings. So all this is by way of saying, you're talking about using perhaps an existing board or an existing, the Economic Development Committee or whatever, and something is missing and something is complicated as a hospital. There's no unifying force tying all of these things that are going on in all these disparate organizations and boards and bringing that knowledge forward. It's not happening. So I'm very concerned about what happens if you lose, continuity. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I don't want to be the person sitting here going to all of the meetings and saying, this is what this board did, and this is what this board did, and this is what the bylaw says, and everything else.
Although it's helpful that you do that.
Well, I understand that. I mean, I keep saying, everything is reversed in what we have to do here to get things done. It ought to be 90% effort and 10% follow-up. Instead, it's 10% effort and 90% follow-up. That's the only way things get accomplished now. And I don't think you can develop the hospital property and manage the development of the hospital property that way. So you need to think about how you're going to do it and what it's going to take to do it. And maybe it's a consultant, maybe it's a special hospital development department or whatever, I don't know. But you need to do something better than it's happening now.
There's people in town that are real estate developers.
It comes back to the point that you started to raise, and that is fundamentally, are you just gonna take a parcel and put it out because you want a 40B project on that? Or Are you gonna put out to multiple developers? Are you gonna put the whole thing out and want one developer to respond with a variety of uses that they're going to address? And that's something that has to be determined sooner rather than later as well.
So for me, those are good questions right now that I personally am unprepared to answer, but I agree that the questions we need to figure out.
I would also like to know that someone will be there, some stakeholders will be at the next Concom meeting, which is on the 15th, when supposedly they're going to look at,
Sarah Reposa will be at the meeting.
you know, well, if anybody else is a stakeholder here, I think they ought to be there. Is anybody who, you know, we worked so hard to get that housing production plan approved, just so we could take advantage of the safe harbors, and I would hate to see something fall through the cracks here because of lack of attention.
Message received, Phil.
Well, I guess the follow-up question is whether the town administration is gonna be present, other than Sarah Reposa. And town administration, I guess, would be Mike and Chris, to follow through on that.
Yeah, one of us will be there.
Will be represented.
Okay, good.
Do any of us, I currently have a separate thing I'm supposed to do that night, but do any of us have the time to do that, to be there?
Well, it shouldn't be Pete, I think, because
I'm here every night anyway, so one more night isn't gonna be a problem.
I am out of town then. Okay, that should next day.
So anything else, we're still on the annual calendar. Anything else on the annual calendar?
I think those are, I think at this point, from what I did, if you have any reactions, Mike, that would be,
Yeah, I think we need to keep refining this until we
Yeah,
get down
just keep
to it,
refining
yeah.
it.
okay.
So next thing is our selectmen communication policies.
And Pete, I'm gonna suggest that actually before you do that, you jump to the third one, because
Okay,
it kind
please.
of ties to the calendar,
All right.
even as what we had scheduled for May. And in the interest of time, I'm not gonna try to drag you guys into anything here. I have an update. So if you, so there's the 6th, there's June 5th update. Let me tell you, I got some feedback. What I've done here, I haven't changed anything on the first floor, so if you read the first floor, they haven't changed, but the feedback I got was the 5th category. And I took liberal editorial license on how I worded this. But the point behind the feedback that I got was really, we should be thinking more about taking more proactive and a more responsible view toward the maintenance of our town infrastructure. I broadened that a little bit, but Mike Marcucci, I was thinking a bit of you and some of the discussions we've had around when we hire staff, and the direct cost of staff shows up on a department budget, but nobody really thinks about the broader full cost of staff. So I've actually, in this particular, these are all drafts. I tried to get 3 bullets in each category, so it's again, not trying to stake anything out, but I was trying to point out that we actually think about the long-term maintenance costs that are required for our infrastructure, that we think about the long-term cost implications when we grow staff, and we also think about the long-term cost of programs when they get launched. So all of it's focused around taking the long-term view, so you know what you're actually committing to financially over the long term before you make a spot decision about a particular issue that's on the table. So good. At this point, these, I've got this here, not intending it to be the ultimate final set of goals that I was lobbying. These are the ones they have to be. I wanted to put a stake in the ground to get to, as a new selectman, to do one of 2 things. Either for the 3 of us to figure out we actually all are trying to get the same things done here in town, or for me to know point blank that we're not. And then at least I understand why we'll get cross-threaded a lot.
So I've got a non-substantive comment on the goal.
Sure.
And this was, and I've thought about this a fair amount, and I agree with all of the goals. I mean, my reaction to it, though, I'm thinking about it, is there's too many of them.
Yeah.
And that I think that before we pick the goals, we sort of have to decide sort of what are the goals of the goals, right?
Mhm.
So in other words, are these sort of the kind of goals that we can essentially have in place forever, right? We decided the town goals, and these are the goals that they don't really change. Or do we want a smaller set of goals to say, for the next 5 years, here are the 5 things we want to do, right? And they can be either, you know, as general as some of these, or more specific, right? So we can say, I mean, the different way to think about it is within the affordable, you know, community housing goals, the first bullet point there, you know, that's a goal we'd have in the next 5 years, right? You could make the increased availability of senior housing more specific, so, you know, add 25 units of senior housing. My concern about, because I think the goals are good goals, and I think you're right on, and we ought to have them, but I just wonder if they're too general.
Well, these were intended as strategic goals, not long-range goals and not operating year goals. So in the grand scheme of things, you'd have strategic goals, you'd have the long-range goals that you're talking about, you'd have operational goals. Let me just briefly comment on why I'm bothering. In the 22 years I've been in this town, I've heard people say what we're trying to do or what we think is important in town. And I've observed things that I think have happened that even though they weren't articulated as specific things that were important in town, when I look at, and I'm thinking particularly around some of the educational stuff we do with our kids, it reflects a priority on certain values or certain things that we think are important. And I was trying to capture that in, it is too big a list of goals, I get that, but I was trying to capture that. Some of those things are unspoken. The immediate practical application of this that I've been lobbying for with the State Hospital Master Planning Committee is that if, I assume we had these goals to start with, but the point was when the Master Planning Committee puts an option out on the table, in the absence of some clear articulation of what the big picture goals are of what this town is trying to accomplish, somebody who wants one particular thing and doesn't see it in that option doesn't like the option. Whereas if the Master Planning Committee could say, here's an option, here's the goals that we all recognize are town goals, and here's how it advances these goals. It doesn't happen to do very much over here, but it's to get people to see the full worth of something rather than only focus in on their narrow. So the practical application, why I care about it this particular year, is I've been watching the Master Planning Committee trying to get to an answer of what everybody wants. And it's like, well, if you don't have a framework to actually express how this is delivering it, then the people from outside only know what they wanted, and they don't look at it in a bigger. So that was the real purpose behind this.
They did try to do that, by the way, at the last meeting, at the last public meeting. I mean, they had their, you know, their matrix, their sheet at the end. I'm not sure how well it worked, given the lateness of the evening and everything else, but basically it was, these are what we, again, these are what we think the town goals are, these are the things that we think contribute, you know, to town character, whatever. So there were pecuniary, non-pecuniary items listed up there, and the idea was to, does this meet the goals, everything else, all of which I thought would be, the committee would then use to coordinate into a consolidated plan that said, this is what we think the number one scenario is, this is how we think it meets the following goals and how well it satisfies those goals. So they were looking to do that. I'm not sure it happened.
Yeah, well, but it was a move in the right direction, but it was the committee making up what they thought the goals, or imputing what the goals they think are.
Yeah, they took that off the direction that they thought they got from the Board of Selectmen, just so you know.
And they got a charter, and that charter is not inconsistent completely with this thing. I'm just saying I think we could do a little better job. The other place that I see this coming in is, the one, I'll throw one here that I think is important, but I'm not sure that the town's acted on it in a way that suggests it is the diversification of the tax base. I see a very ambivalent view toward commercial development on almost all fronts. And when you sit there on one hand and say, well, our taxes are too high, we need to drive our taxes down, we need to increase our affordable housing, and people will come in who are not going to probably completely pay for the town services that they're adding. We want to have affordable housing for seniors so they won't leave. You can't kind of like do all those things if you remain reliant upon a real estate tax base. You have to diversify. We don't, I'm hoping, if that's in fact one of our goals, that by making it that's in concrete and say, yeah, that's something that we do, we will be able to drive more disciplined discussions when commercial opportunities arise, and not just kind of let them kind of wither and die or twist in the wind, and sometimes they come through and sometimes they don't. So that's kind of where I was coming from in doing this. I agree with your point, Mike, there's more here. I started with 9 of my own, and then when I had the 4, I said, well, it's probably 10 or 12. I'll fill those in, I got the 4, and then I got a whole new category, so now I'm up to 15, but not enough on all of them. And in fact, it would be a healthy discussion if some of these don't belong here, or if we're not all, if these don't seem reasonable or something like this, we ought to have that discussion, because maybe some of these just don't belong here. We don't have the commitment to it. So that was pretty much.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this is a good exercise and we should do it. And I think within these, there have to be fewer of them, because the problem is there have to be fewer of them, or instead of bullet points, we need numbers. We need to rank them and say some are more important than others. But I think you could have the same problem with this set of goals. Because to me, diversification of the tax base and, support and protect, maintain, attractive open space acquisitions are not equal. One's more important than the other. And,
Which one did you think was?
I would think diversification of the tax base is more important.
I was gonna say, based on actions, I would say.
Well, no, well, right, and that's what I'm saying, I might be in the minority. If these are goals that we're gonna develop, I would say, we have already supported and protected and maintained attractive open space acquisitions. We have lots of open space. We don't need more open space. So I would say that it's not a goal, or it's a minor goal, simply because that's something we can sort of check off. We've done it, done really well. We're not gonna go backwards. We're not gonna suddenly sell off 1,000 acres of the town.
Yeah.
But if you put them both in there, I've seen this a little bit in the proposals that come with the hospital, and that you sort of weigh them. There's not necessarily weighing of them, saying, well, we want to honor the agricultural history, and at one point in the after RFP, is honoring the agricultural history of the site was kind of in the same list with fiscal prudence, right? And you have to rank and prioritize some of them. So I think
Well, and what I was trying to do here was actually not, I think it's very hard to rank and prioritize fiscal prudence over maintaining historic character. I don't know how you do the trade-off. It may be that there's some groupings of these, that some are the hard bottom line discipline goals, and then there's another set that are the community atmosphere goals, and maybe that's how we do it. But first off, this is the conversation that I think we need to have. From where to take this from here, I would suggest among the 3, well, I put my stake in the ground here, but if you have specific ones you think don't belong there, or if this has merit, think about how you want to see it changed, deletions, reorganizations. If it's ranking, that's okay, it's ranking. I would say that this was not me putting down a personal, I was trying not to put down a personal view. I was trying to reflect what I believe I've perceived over 22 years through either what people have said or what people have done, and this was a reflection of that. It was not really trying to drive an answer that I thought was the answer. And I did it deliberately that way, probably imperfectly, but to try to keep it neutral. But you're probably right. Now we should get to the point where we get a little more specific about what do we actually want to do, rather than what do people want to do for 22 years. Okay? Speed up, Mike. Okay, that's it for that.
Well, why don't we keep coming back to
Yeah,
this,
just
like the annual calendar, we'll
Yeah.
get this refined.
Yeah.
And then your communication policy.
So Mark, I think, so this has been coming up and being discussed for a little bit for a while. I think if you've read it, you know where I'm coming from. I'm trying to figure out a way that I can communicate, which does not violate the open meeting laws, but allows me to communicate to people. And my proposal was you can communicate matters of fact, and you can communicate matters of public record, opinions, or whatever is already in the public record. The position I had was that rather than a policy here at the Board of Selectmen that we do not copy each other when we're talking to people, when a communication, we're only talking about one kind of communication that comes into all 3 selectmen as a communication to the Board of Selectmen. Not talking about one-on-one or even 2, one-on-2. that the standard should be, whatever you're communicating should be sufficiently non-violating of the open meeting law that you can in fact copy the other selectmen on what it is you said, because you're stating facts and you're basically repeating the public record. So that was what I proposed. I was trying to find a way to have something that worked as opposed to everybody just says what they want, whenever they want. Which doesn't seem to be
So
ideal.
we put this off in discussing this in the past, Mark, because you weren't here. And so basically it's to get your input at this point on this proposal. Have you had a chance to look at it?
I did look at it. I actually also conferred with the Director of Open Government's office and the AG's office. And they were very non-flexible.
What did they say we can do? I have no interest at all in being told what I can't do. I want a positive answer on what we can do, and the answer, nothing, tells me I've completely wasted my time in trying to take on public office, try to serve this town. I want answers on what we can do. And I'm not hammering you, Mark. I'm hammering the idiots that are over there that basically are really gonna sit on their butts and be firm about
Now,
it.
the problem is the legislature put this in place. That's the basic problem. With a whole lot of lobbying and a lot of us municipal people fought with them for months, and this is the best we got. It was even worse before. The problem is, they've stuck to this definition of deliberation right in there, which you can read yourself, which is very expansive. And when you have a 3-member board of selectmen, more than one, and you trigger everything. And the fact is, if you're communicating, that's deliberating for all intents and purposes. As a matter of fact, deliberating has an exception which basically says transmit materials without comment or without giving an opinion or something like that.
Mhm.
I actually put it to them, given the scenario that you're receiving, and frankly, the whole issue of your activity on social media, you know, frankly, that and the open meeting law just don't mesh.
If
So-
that's true, Mark, though, my activity in a public meeting doesn't mesh. My talking to anybody in public doesn't mesh. The fact that I'm using social media to do
No,
it is irrelevant.
it's the involvement of more than one other member, hearing what's being said, or receiving the communication, that's what triggers it, because of the definition that they've stuck in the statute. So what I said to them was, suppose the Board of Selectmen designates one of their number in advance to respond to these inquiries on behalf of the board and simply CCs the others without comment. And the response I got back was, okay, you can designate one, but they can't CC the other two with the comments. You have to wait till the next meeting and provide the copies at that time. That's what I was told.
Okay.
So, and what's the
I
answer on that?
appreciate your effort, Mark.
So what we can do, yes, we can designate one member to respond, and we still will be in ignorance about that response.
Yeah.
At least you won't get 3 inconsistent responses. Potentially.
Yeah, well, I don't think we have the interest in
And
that.
the other alternative is to speak to your legislators and say, look, let's get real, this is the problems we're dealing with in the real world, trying to service constituents. And on the one hand, you folks have seen fit to completely exempt yourselves, and on the other hand, our hands at the local level are totally tied, and we need some flexibility here. And frankly, good luck, because you won't get it, but,
Okay.
they won't even give us the full authority for attorney-client privilege in the context of local meeting law. They won't give us the authority right now, more fundamentally, we have negotiations that are non-labor negotiations, but very much affect the town's bargaining position, that ought to be able to take place in executive session, and you can't, and we fought for it.
Well, first off, Mark, thank you for your efforts. I'm fired up, but I'm not fired up at you. I'm fired up at any legal system that prevents public officials from doing the job that they ran for, that they took an oath they would do, and through the administration of regulations, basically prevents that person from doing that job and complying with the regulations. I will just so you two know, I will not copy you the communications that I send out to people. I will do my best to keep my communications to facts and matters of public record. And you're gonna do whatever you're gonna choose to do in your communications, but I think the idea that somehow or another we can't talk to the public is just flat out unacceptable. And if it has to come to a major battle about that, I think the first step is somebody out there in the public that doesn't like what they're being told, that somebody wants to talk to them, has to make a flaming complaint about it, that they would rather be left in ignorance and silence. And I think our problem here is the exact opposite, people that basically would like to hear more and better understand what's going on. So I will do my best to maintain the spirit of the public, of the open meeting law, in the spirit of informing the public and not doing any kind of deliberation or processing along the way. And you guys, I'll tell you about it in our next meeting.
Okay,
Sounds good to me,
all
guys.
right. So then our next item is licenses and permits, and why don't we just do them all at once? I'll just read them. Rebecca Stevenson requests a one-day wine and malt beverage permit for a fundraising event, Global Women's Health Initiative, to take place at the First Parish Unitarian Universalist Church, North Street, on Friday, June 16, 2017, from 5 to 9 p.m. Starbucks Medfield requests permission to hold event, Coffee with a Cop, in Straw Hat Park on Saturday, June 24, 2017, from 1 to 3. Pastries will be served. This event is nationwide. Man, they're gonna sell a lot of pastries, give away a lot of pastries at Straw Hat Park. Medfield Public Library requests permission to hold children and family programs in Gazebo Park as follows, weather permitting. Family story time, Wednesday and Thursdays, June through August, 11:30 to noon. Summer reading kickoff event, Saturday, June 17, 11 to 1. Summer Songfest, Thursday, July 13, 10:30 to 11:15 a.m. End of summer celebration, Tuesday, August 22, 3 to 5 p.m. And then finally, the Norfolk Hunt Club requests a one-day liquor permit for their annual event, Polo in the Country, to take place on September 10, 2017. Rain date is September 17th. Do we have a motion to
I
accept all
move that
those?
we approve the licenses and permits as requested.
Second.
Any further discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Town administrator update.
I don't think at this time I'd have a lot to update you on.
Your update is you'd like to go home soon.
That's okay, but I think Bill already covered the item about conservation meeting. I think that was the main thing I wanted to let you know about, so.
I just have two things. One, there'll be an open house for Chief Kingsbury for his retirement on Thursday, June 22nd from 4 to 7. It'll be an open house for anybody who wants to stop in and say goodbye. And the other item I have is that the State Hospital campus will be closed beginning July 1st until September 15th for filming.
When is the chief's actual last day?
We're working on that right now. It's at the Public Safety Building. Right now, he's planning on the end of June. We may extend that as necessary until we can locate an intern to fill in.
Let's see, acceptance and/or correction of minutes, May 23 minutes. Any issues with the May 23 minutes?
I wasn't there. My only objection is that you had a 20-minute meeting on that, and I wasn't there.
Us too.
And there was a comment about
I did make the observation that I thought it was me that was stretching her meeting.
Clearly, it was me.
And you know, you're back again tonight.
And here it is, 9:45. Irrefutable proof.
So, do you want to make a motion to?
I move that we approve the May 23rd minutes.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. And then, let's see, we have to approve the December 20 minutes.
That was the issue regarding the rail trail paragraph.
I now understand what it says, but I don't know.
I sent Chris some typos.
I have a couple of editorial.
We have
There
the-
weren't things that changed the meaning of anything.
We have the ones, I was fine with them before, so I would
Okay.
move we approve the December 20th minutes. That's correct.
Yeah, I had emailed them
Okay, so all in favor of the amended minutes?
Aye.
Aye. Informational.
Oh, there is one other item I should update you on, and that's the proposal, the revised proposal for Dale Street. So, but you have the plans.
Oh, the 40B.
Yes.
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
The developers have come back with a proposal for two separate developments. One across from the cemetery, which would be 25 for sale condominium units. And the other one would be rental development that's on the town garage side, Group 27, and that would be for 70 units of rental housing. So
And
it's a
that's-
total of 95 units.
And so on the North Street side, it's 50 apartments and 25 for,
50 apartments and 20
20
townhouses.
are those townhouses on that side sale units as well? Or
They're
no?
rental.
They're all, everything's
It's
rental.
all
on that
rental.
side.
It's all rental on that side. The other side is all for sale.
Is there 40B?
Both for
Element?
Please,
What's, what, 10, 20, 25%? What's the?
Well, it has to be 25% minimum.
yeah. And the sales price that they're contemplating for the condos is 750, for the market rate units, 750 to 850,000. And I believe the affordable is, they can go up to around 300,000. They're very large, they're about 2,500 to 2,800 square
No, the
feet.
affordables don't go up that high.
I think they do, depending on if they're moderate.
No, it's
They
all,
can.
well,
They're not
they-
considered low income, they're moderate income. Then depending on family size,
Right.
they can go up.
correct.
And then for the rental units, they're talking about for 3-bedroom units in the market rate for $2,500 to $3,000 a month. And I don't know, it's changing all the time on the rental units, depends on family size and everything else, the number of bedrooms. I don't know what those would be. We have met with them, Sarah was writing up her comments, so I'll have her forward you her draft of the comments from the various departments, heads that met with them, so you can make any suggestions that you would like to the draft that she's written up.
Do we need to move fast sooner rather than later on the Affordable Housing Trust membership in light of this?
Absolutely. I would say we do
Well,
if we want to, certainly.
You should, because a year goes by pretty quickly.
Actually, I guess maybe another way of doing it is, do we have the voice of the Medfield Responsible Affordable Housing Group that was the original group that formed against, in response to the first? Are they, are they part, are they aware and are they part of this conversation?
Which, are you talking about the group from the Community Development Corporation?
No. It was the opposed Medfield Meadows group. They're now the Medfield Responsible Affordable Housing Group.
So what do you
But
have?
they are the people that were most knowledgeable of the project and that site. A good number of them live around there. So basically, as we react to this, A, we ought to know what's going on, and B, we ought to be getting their inputs around this.
Any of these meetings are, well, no, they're not open necessarily open to the public, because there isn't.
They haven't filed anything yet, this was an initial showing us
Informal
the plan,
Yeah.
informal as to what feedback we received.
And there is still a pending piece of litigation that group has brought against the developer on the west side of the street on wetlands issues. That's pending in Norfolk Superior Court and with DEP.
We are, they are aware that we have applied for safe harbor, so they are aware of that, and that they will.
So it makes it important to know where we stand on our application.
I mean, I think with respect to the Affordable Housing Trust, I think we gotta do what we did with the other two committees, set a deadline for applications, and then make the appointments. And I would have suggested that we do it on June 20th, Gus, you won't be here, so I was just doing it July 11th. If we close the application sometime in advance of July 11th, we can make those appointments on July 11th.
I would say, do you wanna close it on July 3rd?
Sure.
have all applications in by July 3rd, and then we can forward them you for review before the 11th.
Works for me. Yeah, it seems like an awful far time away, unfortunately, but I don't know if we're not gonna be.
Well,
able to do it
if it, in
otherwise.
the interest of, my interest in terms of this, I've seen, I get, it's an open meeting, I can say what I think here. Tim Bonfati, I've seen, I think we all have, or at least I've gotten an email, that he has an interest, I would absolutely endorse that. I believe Brent Nelson from the Medfield Responsible Affordable Housing Group would also be interested, I think, I haven't talked to him, but I believe he would, he's probably one of the most qualified people in that group to actually legitimately be on the Affordable Housing Trust, so I would trust you two guys to pick good people in my absence in the interest of getting this done sooner rather than later.
Well, you could certainly weigh in on them if you
Yeah.
weren't here at the
Yeah.
meeting point,
Yeah.
you could send us your ideas.
Yeah.
You may want to consider too, this is a very critical committee as far as the town's concerned. You may want to go out and beat the drums and
Yeah.
try to encourage people to apply.
Yeah.
Because you need particular skills for a committee like
Right.
this. And the people that might necessarily be interested might not necessarily have best qualifications.
How many
I
people?
think Jack Wolf also is.
Well, we have, for instance, Franklin, we have somebody who's got banking connections and understands financing and all.
Yeah.
And Todd Trujillo has expressed interest, and he works in affordable housing, so he'd be good. I know that Evan Weisenfeld expressed interest.
This is a town group, so in terms of, I'm sorry if I cut that.
No, go ahead.
This is a town group that's proactive, so it's a given that they're not going to try to develop on the sites that are in controversy, but they're gonna be looking for sites and projects to work on. So you gotta look at that in terms of the context of this group, what skill set do they bring to the table? Apparently, this other could become an issue at any point in time, because if you got a year from the time any particular project is approved and this county's going to subsidize housing inventory, they have a year to pull their building permits. If they don't, it drops out, and that creates a gap. And if there's somebody waiting in the wing.
Committees, ALS and the fire chief study committee, that there were a lot of names thrown about, you know, this person's interested, you all had names, and it wasn't until we actually started to get information from people that they actually stepped forward to actually be on the committee, and not everybody that was mentioned along the way actually ended up submitting a letter. So I think where you're looking to fill very specific roles, and you should be looking at specific resumes, not just letters of interest for this committee. I don't think waiting until the July meeting is bad on this. I don't think this is a committee you want to rush. We've just approved $1 million worth of funding. I think it's important that you really take the time to make sure you build each of these slots appropriately.
I think July 11th is fine, I don't
All
think
right,
the 20
let's
days
go
is
with
gonna
the,
give it.
and then July 3rd was you suggesting for the deadline,
Correct.
so, all right.
And I think as long as we put it out in social media and put it out that we're looking for full resumes and letters of interest from people to serve on the committee.
Not just
Let me
names
read the
that they're
composition.
interested.
Oh, go ahead, that one.
Not just, people saying, I'm interested, put me on the list.
Yeah. Well, let me
Not
read from
resumes.
the bylaw that was adopted at town meeting, or the trust agreement. The voting members shall include a member of the Board of Selectmen chosen by the Board of Selectmen, a member of the Affordable Housing Committee chosen by the Affordable Housing Committee, and 5 members appointed by the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen shall request nominations from the Planning Board and the Warrant Committee, and shall consider any such nominations. The at-large members shall be residents who would bring to the trust relevant experience in the fields of real estate, housing, banking, finance, law, architecture, social services, or other applicable areas of professional experience. So there are some specific designated people, and then you need to write to the planning board and the warrant committee for any suggestions they want to do.
I know the warrant committee will be here on the 20th.
Right.
Right, so maybe they can put someone forward then.
So if you want us to draft a letter and get it out to
So
them.
they should get us their name of their person before that.
Well, I think was there a discussion that we're not necessarily appointing somebody from within their committee, but could
Yeah.
appoint somebody.
And it's just a nomination, we don't have to
Right.
appoint them, we have this discussion, so it doesn't, there does not have to be a warrant committee member, there's not.
Give it
But I think if they put forth a nomination, we're gonna,
Right.
if they're gonna
I
give
meant
us,
more actually the planning board.
if those two groups are gonna give us nominations, we should see resumes from those people as well. not
Correct,
just
I think
names.
anybody who's interested in the committee needs to put that forward.
Okay,
And then if they can send it to Evelyn or myself, so that we have, one person that's home all this evening, that would be great.
okay. So I skipped over the selectmen's reports, Mike?
We had a nice weekend of events, graduation was nice, the Grist Mill bench dedication was excellent.
Very moving.
Hopefully the microphone is working, the feedback I got from someone at Memorial Day, that they enjoy our meetings, but we don't talk into the microphones enough, so they can't hear us at home. So, try to talk more to the microphone for the benefit of the home audience, which I understand is not actually watching, it's not broadcasting. So, maybe when people are watching YouTube, we can see if they actually spoke into the microphone better. But
So this is the longest list I've ever had, but I'll skip part of it. I went to the Mass Municipal Association Regional Selectmen's meeting a couple of weeks ago. On the budget front, basically, we were talking about how the budget for the state is down, so who knows what's gonna happen. The Walpole Police Chief was there talking about, the biggest topic was legalization of marijuana. There were some things I learned there that I thought were interesting. One, 10 grams of marijuana is considered a serving. A single chocolate chip cookie laced with marijuana is 160 grams, so for people who might think they could eat a chocolate chip cookie, you don't want to do it. You have to actually cut it up, at least into quarters, I suspect, in order to survive that.
news you can use from Gus Murray.
The selectman's job has just broadened my horizons in so many directions, it's
And then
really
if
astonishing.
you drop your chocolate chip cookie, then your dog comes along and gets 16 servings of.
Well, they do also, the real ironic thing is, a few years ago, we got rid of candy cigarettes because we didn't want kids to go down the path of smoking.
Yeah, no, it's-
Now they have Swedish fish. If you want to know whether yours has been laced with marijuana, hold it up to the light, and if there's little specks in it, then it's one that's been set up. The things you learn at these meetings. Another thing that was interesting was that because marijuana, you can both like smoke it, you can, get direct contact with it through oil, or you can eat it. That kids that don't really have a lot of experience with marijuana may start eating the chocolate chip cookie. It takes longer to process through the system, so they think it's not doing anything, so they switch over to something more immediate, and then they get hit like a Mack truck. What he said was that you get some pretty psychotic people. He said they don't tend to die, but they just really are in rough shape. A couple of interesting things from a policy standpoint. The fact the AG has not figured out how this is all going to work. So the first thing is a lot of this is in flux. One of the things that she mentioned, though, was it's possible that because towns have made provisions for medical marijuana facilities, that would suggest that towns have accepted the use, and depending on how the laws get interpreted when this whole thing sorts out, you could find yourself having already approved recreational marijuana because you've made provisions for the medical marijuana. So it's just up in the air. We've done the right thing with the zoning change and the bylaws, and we've done one more thing with the letter that we sent in. I asked if she had gotten any early indication around that letter asking for us to have the authority to make this a dry town for purposes of grass, and she wasn't that familiar with it, so she thought it couldn't hurt, but she didn't give me any insight on that. The other thing that the Walpole Police Chief mentioned is that he thought Massachusetts would become the Colorado of New England. And what he means by that is Colorado legalized marijuana, and all the surrounding states that don't have it, suddenly that becomes the place that they all go to. So that was interesting. The other thing is, because the tax rates are different on medical marijuana versus recreational marijuana, in Colorado, suddenly the number of people who have medical marijuana permits has gone up higher. It's got everything to do with the tax rates. So that was that. The other item I had, we had our first ALS study committee meeting last Thursday. We have our second meeting scheduled for this coming Thursday. I regret to inform you that I have been chosen as the permanent chair now that you've temporarily put me in it. So I'm the chair. This is a good committee. I'm highly confident that the members of this committee, coming from all different aspects of this issue, are prepared to come together and collaboratively take a look at the full range of issues. So I was really happy about that. I did all the stuff you guys did over the weekend. I had a couple other meetings with people, but I'll talk about that later. The only other issue I wanted to bring up was the door-to-door solicitation, and I have a question. It's pretty clear that the Insight Pest Control Company is going all over the place, telling people that they're authorized, they have permits. They're not necessarily obnoxious, but they are aggressive. And I checked with Chief Meany at graduation because he put in the police log that was in the patch that they had indicated they had all the permits, and I didn't remember ever having talked to him. He said no, only the Board of Selectmen does it. So the question is, it appears to be a legitimate company. I've gone on the website, I've even played their little ant game, and I scored 1,200 points twice before I got smashed in the sugar bowl. But if we have improper conduct, does it make sense for you or for Mike to call them and let them know, or?
We talked to the police chief about it today. He is aware that they do not have a permit from the Board of Selectmen and he will.
So is he gonna contact
I
them?
believe he's going to.
Okay,
What
good.
I've found sometimes over the years is, and I don't know if this is a national company.
It is.
Some of the national companies will hire local contractors to come in and solicit for them within the town. And the local contractors figure they're only gonna be there for a couple of weeks.
It
Just
seems a
go until
little
they get
more,
caught.
they have an actual office in Hopkinton or Holliston somewhere, so they're around.
Well, they hop and skip from town to
yeah.
town until they get caught.
Well, I think
and-
one of the others is not every town requires companies like that to have a permit. So a lot of them just think because they have a state permit that they don't actually need a local permit.
So this is a blow up of one of the business cards with the name, so he identified himself. There's a second salesman who didn't have cards, who said his name was Neil.
The bottom line permit is, whether we permit them or not, is no resident is required to deal with these people. You have the ability to ask them to leave your property, and if they refuse, at that point, they call the police and they're trespassing. So,
What I'm trying to do here, given some people complained, as I said, I would bring it up in this meeting. I'm guessing given that it seemed like a legitimate company when I went on their website, it's possible that if we just have some administrative procedure to call these people up and say, do you realize how badly you're trashing your business in our town through your sales practices, perhaps this problem just takes care of itself.
No, I understand more if the charitable corporations do not need a
that's
permit.
advocacy. Right, so if they wanna, political, religious, education, whatever, just wanna talk, if they're soliciting for funds, then they probably at least need to register, but that's a gray area. But clearly somebody that is commercial is clearly subject to regulation.
And what's the penalty if they?
It's whatever the fine is, it's a slap on the wrist. It's just another local bylaw that's being violated.
So I
The
guess
police may intercede and stop them if they're aware that they don't have a license.
So other than the events that were discussed, which were all really excellent, I thought, I thought the bench at the grist mill was very movingly done. The all-night graduation party decorations were beyond belief. They were so high quality. And I thought that the Memorial Day celebration was very nicely done. But the thing that I was gonna bring up was that I noticed that Eric O'Brien's company is leaving town, and I was sorry to see that. And it just occurred to me, we're always talking about trying to get people to have businesses in Medfield. Here's a business that's been very successful in Medfield, family business, long time. I guess they wanted to own their own building, which they don't, and so they're going to Medway. Milford. Well, they said Medway, I think.
Well, they live in Medway.
No, I think the building was in Medway that they were going to, was the article that I saw of it. But it just struck me that maybe the town should try to have some sort of proactive outreach to people like that. And I don't know how you find out about it. I mean, I found out about it once they were pretty much set to go. But it might behoove the town to have some sort of proactive outreach to businesses to try to make them stay in town or to encourage them. Because we don't have very many businesses, we would like to keep them, so that was just a thought. Anything in the informational that you guys want to share with us?
The Norfolk County stuff was just to let us know about it.
Yeah, that's the treasurer pays that assessment and it gives you the increase. And what we do on that, by making one payment at $44,000 goes into the OPEB article for next year.
10:05, are we ready to have dinner?
I will move that we adjourn.
Second.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm really hungry. I had a brownie before we got here.
Did you hold it up to the light to see if there were little flakes in it?
Yes, and there were.
Medfield TV.